I used to be a perfectly normal person, just a railroad worker. One day, like any other, I woke up and started my workday. My job was to use dynamite to blast through rocks to build railroads. It was a tough job, but one that I took pride in. I was entrusted with an important task, loading explosives and handling tools. I worked like a strong, careful, responsible man. I wasn't afraid of the job. It was part of my life. But one day, a terrible accident happened. I never thought that my life would change forever because of one small mistake, a mistake I could never have imagined. But it took everything I had. It was September 13th, 1848, a day I'll never forget. I was doing my work, loading gunpowder into a crack in the rock. This job required perfect precision. One small mistake could lead to unimaginable consequences, and I made one. I forgot to pack sand before tamping the powder. I didn't realize the mistake. I just thought everything would be fine. But then, a tiny spark from my tamping iron struck the rock, and a catastrophic explosion occurred. No one could have imagined how terrifying it was. The iron rod, 5 feet long and weighing over 13 pounds, shot up into the air and pierced through my left cheek, continuing through my brain and out the top of my skull. An explosion, an iron rod piercing my head, and I could still stand up. The feeling I had in that moment was strange. My head was bleeding profusely. Everything around me became a blur. I didn't feel the pain that people might think. In fact, I felt nothing but an empty sensation. I could still stand up. I could still speak. But I knew something had changed permanently inside me. I was taken to the hospital, and the doctor said I shouldn't have survived. But I did. I don't know how, but I stood up and tried to speak. People couldn't believe it. I was a miracle, but I didn't feel that way. Yes, I survived, but I was no longer me. That feeling is hard to describe. Dr. Harlow, the doctor who treated me, said I would need a long time to recover, but still, I had survived. Everyone said I was one of the rare miracles. However, when I started to return to normal life, I realized a significant change in myself. I was no longer the person I once was. I became irritable, easily angered, and I couldn't control my emotions. Before, I was kind, calm, and thoughtful. But now, I had no patience with anyone. My friends started avoiding me. My fiancée, the one I loved, left me while I was still recovering. The company I worked for also dismissed me. They said I wasn't capable of working anymore. And then, I had to find a new way to live. That was when I began to feel like I was being rejected, abandoned. Not only my loved ones, but society looked at me differently. They no longer saw me as a person. I didn't know who I was anymore. But I knew one thing. My life was no longer the same. Since then, I couldn't interact normally with anyone. I became an oddity, a living freak. I started doing bizarre jobs, transitioning from a railroad worker to performing in strange exhibitions. I didn't know why I had to live that way, but I had no choice but to continue living. The more I lived, the more I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Finally, I decided to leave. I moved to Chile and started over. I worked as a stagecoach driver, a simple job, but at least I felt independent. I tried to rebuild my life, but the pain never left me. The loneliness, the rejection from everyone, always remained with me. My life was no longer what it once was, but I kept living. Then, in 1859, I returned to America, where I had once been a railroad worker. But my body was no longer the same. I no longer had the strength. In 1860, I died from seizures. And my death wasn't much of a surprise. But after my death, I became part of scientific research. Dr. Harlow asked my family to exhume my skull and take the iron rod that had pierced my head. for research purposes. They said I was the starting point for modern neuroscience. And then, my name became a part of medical history. My story is not just about an accident, it's a story about a person who lost themselves and how society no longer accepted them. My life changed completely, not because I wanted it to, but because I no longer was the person I used to be. I don't tell this story to seek sympathy. I tell it to remind everyone that never judge a person by their actions alone. Every person has value, even when they are no longer whole, and sometimes one small accident can change a person's life completely. Remember me, Phineas Gage, the man who survived, but the society forgot that I was still a human.